Everyone says one day at a time keeps you safe in sobriety, but for me it was a massive loophole. If the commitment was only for today, my addiction had, so tomorrow we can drink. But that wasn't safety, that was permission. As long as tomorrow was an option, the door to drinking stayed open. It meant I was constantly negotiating with myself, and eventually I walked right through that door. So in this video, I'm sharing why one day at a time kept me stuck in that negotiation phase, and why deciding never again was actually easier than deciding just for today 1,000 times over, and what you can do instead of living your life just today. The appeal of one day at a time is obvious. When you're facing something monumental like quitting drinking or quitting drugs, maybe even just starting a business or trying to get your life together, the sheer scale of it can be paralysing. The phrase shrinks the battlefield. When you say one day at a time, it tells you, don't worry about forever, just get through today. And to be clear, this mindset has its place. It originated from the Oxford group and became the cornerstone of Alcoholics Anonymous for a really powerful reason. When you're fighting the intense, immediate battle with addiction, focusing on staying sober for the next 24 hours can be a lifesaver. It's a crucial tool for surviving crisis. But for chronic transformation, for building a new life, a new identity, a new future, I found it deeply flawed. Instead of building me up, it systematically broke me down. Day after day after day. And the first major flaw I found is that this approach guarantees decision fatigue. When you frame your goal as a daily battle, you wake up every single morning at the starting line of the exact same race. The commitment that I'd made, it then felt expired. I then had to find the willpower all over again. I had to actively decide each day, once again, not to drink. So think of your willpower like a phone battery, forcing it to refight the same foundational battle every single morning. It drains it before you've even dealt with the actual challenges of the day. I was spending all of my energy starting a car that had no fuel left for the journey. And this led directly to a more insidious proof. For me, this is wrong, because one day at a time became a powerful anxiety amplifier. Instead of calming me, it locked me in a pressure cooker with no long-term vision that was holding me steady. Every single day felt like a pass-fail final exam. If I had succeeded, I would feel a brief moment of relief before I realised the next day the battle start again. And then if I failed, the feeling was catastrophic. A single slip up felt like a total negation of all of my previous effort. I wasn't building momentum, I was just resetting the stress clock on myself. And for so long, this was the exact trap I fell into. I saw one day at a time as a gritty approach to self-improvement, but it became my personal loophole for self-sabotage. I was trying to get sober and telling myself, just today. But if I felt unmotivated and down and life felt chaotic, the loophole would swing the door wide open again. Well, today's a wash, I might as well drink, I can start fresh tomorrow. Tomorrow became this mythical land where all of my goals would be magically met. I would be sober and life would be peaceful. But actually, by treating every day as an isolated event, I was preventing myself from seeing the devastating pattern. I wasn't just failing for one day, I was failing in the same way every other day. It was an excuse for a repeated failure, disguised as giving myself a second chance. And this brings us to the third problem. The daily mindset actually works against building our new identity because our brains are wired for efficiency. They build habits to automate behaviour. When you do something repeatedly, your brain builds a story. I am the kind of person that does this. But the one day at a time approach treats every action as a special one-off event. It doesn't allow for the compounding effect of identity. You're not becoming someone who doesn't drink. You're just becoming someone who's choosing not to drink today. You're not becoming a writer. You're just someone forcing yourself to write today. And this in itself creates a deep psychological tension, and your brain's natural tendency to revert to old familiar routines almost always wins. And finally, this daily battle creates a profound illusion of progress. You can have a bad day checking all the boxes. You can feel productive, but are you actually moving forward? Or are you just treading water very, very strenuously? It's like trying to cross an ocean by only focusing on the next wave. You're constantly fighting, exhausted from the struggle, but you never look at the compass to see if you're even heading in the right direction. This is the fast track to burnout. You end your day having won a few small battles, but you haven't made any real progress in the war. If this feeling of being stuck in an endless daily struggle sounds familiar, let me know in the comments. What is one goal that you've been trying to tackle one day at a time, without actually seeing any real progress that you want? Because sharing it is literally the first step of getting out of that trap. Okay, so I've just spent a few minutes tearing down one of the most beloved pieces of advice on the planet. So, what's the alternative? Well, for me, the answer was a radical, counterintuitive truth for lasting change. Forever is easier than one day at a time. And I know how that sounds. It sounds absolutely terrifying. It sounds like the very pressure we're trying to escape. But what if a forever commitment, framed correctly, doesn't add pressure, but eliminates it? Instead of being a soldier fighting a new battle every single morning, you become an architect that has designed a system for your life that works for you. And I call it a sobriety blueprint. And it's not about the daily struggle. It's about intentional design. And it has three main parts. One being, you need to define your forever identity. This is the blueprint. The biggest problem that I had with one day at a time was the lack of a North Star, the lack of direction. So we start by creating one. But I'm not talking about a vague goal like get healthy. I'm talking about defining with total clarity the person that you are committed to being forever. And this is the most crucial shift you can make. You move from a goal-based mindset to an identity-based one. Instead of I want to stop drinking, your identity becomes I don't drink. Instead of I want to write a book, it becomes I am a writer. Instead of I need to lose weight. It becomes, I am a healthy person. And this isn't just a word game. This is profound psychological rewiring. When you anchor your actions to an identity, you actually outsource the decision. The question is no longer the exhausting, should I have a drink or not? Instead, the question becomes, what would someone do when they are not a drinker? The answer is obvious. The decision has already been made. Your brain wants to align your actions with your self-image. And this is completely to avoid cognitive dissonance. So you start to act in line with your new identity. Not because you have to, but because that's who you are now. And then you have part 2. And this works as your scaffolding. This is designing your system of inputs. Because once you have your forever identity, you need your scaffolding to support it, like a building. This means shifting your focus away from daily outcomes and onto consistent, non-negotiable inputs. The one day at a time model is obsessed with outcomes. It completely relies on yes or no. Did you win today? Did you drink today? Did you lose that pound? And this is an emotional roller coaster. Whereas with the sobriety blueprint, it ignores the daily outcomes. Instead, you focus on designing a system of simple, repeatable actions, your inputs, that are aligned with your new identity. Your day's success does not need to be measured by a feeling or by a result, but by a simple question. Did I execute my system? Did I do what I wanted to do? For example, for the writer's identity, the input isn't write a brilliant chapter. That's an outcome. The input is sit in the chair and write for 30 minutes every morning. Whether you write one sentence or you write 1,000 words is irrelevant. You showed up. It de-emotionalizes this process and dismantles the decision. You no longer have to debate going to the gym. It's just part of what you do on a Monday as part of your system. And the most important part 3, is engineering for failure. A blueprint and scaffolding are great, but any good architect knows a structure has to withstand stress. Life is chaotic. You will get sick. You will have emergencies. The one day at a time model shatters at the first sign of pressure. One bad day breaks the chain and sends you spiraling back to square one. But the sobriety blueprint, by contrast, anticipates for failure. It plans for it. And this is done by creating a minimum viable day. For every input, every action in your system, you define the absolute bare minimum version you can execute on your worst possible day. This becomes your emergency plan. For example, if your system is go to the gym for 60 minutes, your minimal viable day might be do 10 push-ups at home. If your input is don't drink, your minimum viable day might be delay the first drink by 10 minutes, or drink a glass of water and text someone who knows you're trying. Things don't have to be perfect. The goal of the minimum viable day is not progress, it's momentum. It's about honouring your identity, even in a tiny way. It prevents a 0 day. Instead of saying, I failed today and it's all ruined, you can say, today was absolute chaos, but I still showed up. I'm still a person who doesn't drink. It reframes off days not as failures, but as an integral, planned for part of a lifelong process. From a daily fighter to your lifelong dreams. And if you put these two mindsets side by side, on an emotional level, one day at a time was a high stake drama for me, full of anxiety and dread, full of starting over. The sobriety blueprint for me provided a sense of calm, underlying purpose. Today isn't a final exam, it's just one day in a long, well-designed journey. Cognitively, the approach was a nightmare. I was constantly draining my mental battery on recommitment, but the sobriety blueprint leverages the power of automation. By making my core habits automatic, I freed my mind to solve bigger and more interesting problems. It's the difference between manually flying a plane through a hailstorm and having a really sophisticated autopilot navigate that turbulence for you. And most importantly, the daily battle often leads to stagnation or relapse because it never addresses the underlying identity. The forever commitment is about building a completely new ship from the keel up. It uses the science of conditioning to reinforce your new self-image, making growth feel less like a struggle and more like a natural expression of who you've become. Remember that open door I talked about? The one that one day at a time kept ajar, always giving my addiction a maybe? Well, that wasn't a door for safety. It was a door for escape, a hatch back to a life that I was desperate to leave. It kept me negotiating, hesitating, and ultimately relapsing. Closing that door for good and making my never again decision was probably the scariest thing I ever did. But what I found on the other side wasn't a prison. It was silence. The endless noise of negotiation in my head finally went quiet. The daily struggle to recommit simply vanished. That's the paradox of real change. The forever decision doesn't cage you. It frees you. It frees you from the exhausting loop of making the same choice over and over again. It lets you stop being a soldier in a daily war and become the architect of your own life. You trade the anxiety of all of those daily battles for the calm purpose of a long-term vision. So I invite you to look at the door that you've been keeping ajar, the one that one day at a time keeps unlocked. What would happen if you decided with total conviction to close it, lock it, and start building something new on this side? Let me know in the comments. What is the one door you're so ready to close for good? Stop winning the day. Start building a life.